One of the biggest things that humans beg to wonder is there an afterlife? Do you believe in an afterlife? And if so, which one? There are many different ones. Some examples are Christianity, where they have heaven and hell, where you are sent to one based on your actions and decisions on earth. Maybe it's Buddhism and Hinduism, where you begin to go through life again through another human, maybe an animal, or possibly a plant, or maybe there's no afterlife at all, just a black void where you exist for the rest of your life, for the rest of your existence. Technology continues to advance, and we are reaching limits that were not even thought of. One thing that many people do is run simulations, which are basically kind of a test to see what are the possible outcomes of a certain event. One of the main types of simulations that people like to run is hurricane track waves, where people will simulate which way the hurricane could possibly be going and prepare for it. Through games such as The Sims, where you can simulate lives and people growing and going through it. But it's all through your control. What if one day we are able to create free will in these simulations, to the point where they'll be having their own lives independent from us? As these simulations become more and more of a plausible outcome, how do we know that we are not a simulation? Some of the biggest brains believe in this known as simulation theory. Those who go through the simulation, they will begin to advance, civilize, become better through technology, and they could possibly create their own universe, to the point where we have lines of continuous universes going into each other. So how do we know we are not one of those simulations? Are we the original ones, the first ones yet to create life? Or are we just another one in the many possible universes out there?
What does science say about death? Well, you're looking at someone who has nearly died twice. First time was when I was about 5 years old, and I was attempting to plug in a lamp. What I didn't know is that the cover for the outlet wasn't there, so I was trying to plug a lamp into wires. I was shocked, and I blacked out. I panicked because I was blinking and moving my head and trying to move around and walk around, but all I could see was a black void. I panicked. Oh God, I don't want to be blind for the rest of my life. But then it hit me. What if I'm dead? It was peaceful, really. I woke up about 10 minutes later, all the way on the other side of my room. Second time was when I was about 7 years old, and I was deathly ill. The doctors had never seen anything like it. They said it was similar to pneumonia, but it spread faster and seemed deadlier than they had ever seen before. This was unfortunate because a week from whenever I got sick, I was supposed to get on a plane to go to the East Coast. Me being a poor kid from the West Coast, this was my only chance to ever go to the East Coast. And it still was the only time I've ever been to the East Coast. So, somehow, with doctor approval and my parents' approval, I jumped on that plane with a bunch of drugs to keep me alive. I fell asleep on the plane. And I'm an avid lucid dreamer. Almost do I never have a super vivid dream where I think it's real life. This dream was different. It felt very real, very vivid. Once again, it was that familiar black void from when I was about 5. I was blinking and moving my head around and moving around, but still I could see nothing. Eventually, I was shaken awake by my grandmother, who said that my heart was barely beating and I was barely breathing. What happens in your last moment of brain activity during death is that DMT is released in your brain. So this begs the question, is death like a DMT trip? If you didn't know, you can take DMT, which gives you an insane hallucinogenic trip. Often these trips start with a dark void, but then morph into crazy dimensions that are barely explainable. A fellow student at Egan, Maya Crotty, she remembers things about her grandfather and her mother and her family that no one had ever told her about. You see, her grandfather died shortly before she was born, and often Maya's family tells her that her grandfather would have loved her because their behaviors were very similar and their humor was almost identical. So this begs the question, perhaps, do you trip like on DMT in those last moments of death? And do you trip for what seems like years until you completely forget who you are? Perhaps this is what happens, and you are reborn into the world as someone new, still carrying a few remnants of who you once were. We'll never have distinct answers, but we'll always have ideas. After all, we know more about our own moon than we know about our oceans. This is a question as old as time. What happens in the afterlife? Thank you for listening, and keep thinking. What happens when we die?
I'm impregnable in kind of what I said in the quote. I'm a